I, Publius Cornelius Scipio, now nicknamed Africanus, am going to tell you how the Battle of Zama continued, the final battle of a relentless war that pitted the two powers of the Mediterranean to the ultimate consequences. I, my officers, and my legions were the first to stop a charge of elephants of this magnitude in the open field. That was the first moment when we made history. My men roared. They were exultant, with morale through the roof and eager to continue fighting. I now launched the cavalry from both flanks against the enemy. If I could defeat her, I could charge at Hannibal from the back and achieve a quick victory. But Hannibal was a great general. Knowing that his cavalry was outnumbered, he had ordered my riders to be driven away from the battlefield so they could not help us. I watched helplessly as my two flanks moved away from the army and vanished over the horizon. The infantry would decide the battle. The first two Carthaginian lines began to march, so I ordered the same. The armies slowly approached each other, until the first Carthaginian line charged against Misestati. I ordered to halt the advance and received the charge. Misestati launched a rain of piles over the approaching mercenaries, ending the lives of many of them instantly. They unsheathed their gladios, slightly bent their knees with their eyes forward, and received the charge. I could see the mercenaries throw themselves against Misestati's shields as if they were underworld beasts thirsty for blood. The advantage we had is that the mercenaries came from different places, each with their own style of fighting. My Estatus stepped back slightly, absorbing the energy of the charge, diluting it, tiring the mercenaries, and letting them vent their fury on their shields. When the advantage of the charge had disappeared, my Estatus stopped the retreat and began to stab with their gladius at anything that moved. The Carthaginian mercenaries began to lose ground. Without being cohesive and without fighting as one, they could not stand up to my legionaries. They began to lose men more and more quickly, and their morale was decreasing by the moment. Those men must have been questioning what they were doing, and why or for whom they were fighting so far from their homes, fighting for a people and a general to whom they owed nothing, fighting for just a few coins. The first mercenaries turned around. Soon the first Carthaginian line broke. The Estati now charged against the few mercenaries who were resisting at the front and swept them away. The Estati now sought revenge for their fallen comrades. They were looking to unleash their anger and all the tension from having resisted the elephant charge. The mercenaries were ruthlessly skewered from behind as they fled to their second line. But this was a battle that did not admit cowards. Hannibal ordered that the second line not allow any mercenaries to break through, and to kill anyone who tried. The remnants of the first line, realizing what was happening, ran to the ends of their second line to escape the fight. But many did not make it. The second Carthaginian line charged the Estati, dragging them back into battle. The Estati, who had broken formation chasing the mercenaries, received the charge and suffered the consequences. Dozens of Estati were skewered. Dozens of legionnaires died in that charge before they could reorganize into a solid line to face the new threat. Anyway, those men were exhausted. They had confronted the elephants and fought the mercenaries for a long time. We needed renewed strength. I raised my left arm and lit it up again. It was the signal. For a moment, I looked away, seeking signs of my cavalry on the flanks. We were still alone. The princes relieved Sestati. Fresh and more experienced, they would finish off the second Carthaginian line. The Carthaginian push came to a sudden halt. The scarlet shield wall that my princes presented was too solid for the Carthaginians. The fight was now more uniform, as the second Carthaginian line had received the same training, unlike the mercenaries who each fought differently. But what the armed citizens lacked was experience, and experience is what my men had. The 5th and 6th Legions, survivors of Cannae, banished to Sicily for their failure and known as the Cursed Legions, were battle-hardened. They were my legions. I had given them the opportunity to redeem themselves from their failure, and they were proving that they were up to the Republic, that they would clear their name in this battle. For an hour, the front remained stable, but the stabs that my princes dealt were felt among the Carthaginian ranks. Their rear guard stopped pushing, and their vanguard attempted to escape my men. I searched for my cavalry, but saw no riders or dust clouds, nothing at all. We were still alone. I turned my gaze back to my heavy infantry. We were advancing. The enemy was slowly retreating. I could keep pushing them back, but I needed to break them, crush their morale, trample their will to fight, and send them running home. I sent Misastati to the flanks to threaten the Carthaginians with encirclement. There were some of the mercenaries, but they were no match for Misastati. When a soldier has already fled, even if he regroups, he only thinks about continuing to flee. It's like a dog that's tasted blood. No matter how much it seems that he is no longer interested, he will continue to seek blood. When my Astati reached the flanks, they launched a barrage of pila, drew their gladius, and charged at the mercenaries. These, after receiving them at Pila and seeing how the Astati charged, began to retreat. My legionaries clashed against their ranks, and that was what finally shattered their will to continue fighting. The mercenaries turned around and fled without looking back. The Carthaginians, overwhelmed on the flanks and fearing encirclement, broke ranks and joined the flight. Nothing is sadder than a retreating army. Those screams of anguish and horror, those men pushing their comrades to be able to escape the slaughter, slipping in puddles of blood, stumbling over corpses, crying, screaming, begging the gods to get out of there. Ligurian, Gallic, Iberian, and Balearic mercenaries, along with armed Carthaginian citizens, raced towards the safety of Hannibal's veteran forces. But my men had no mercy. They pursued the retreating enemy, skewering their backs, emptying their lungs, driven by the adrenaline coursing through their veins. Those who were retreating were about to reach the third Carthaginian line, the veterans of Africa, the most loyal followers of Hannibal, when they lowered their spears and formed a wall of hoplites. The first soldiers couldn't stop in time and ended up skewered on the spears of their comrades, of the reserve of the army they were fighting for, under the orders of the general who led them. Those who were coming from behind ran towards the flanks of the formation, threatened on two fronts. I ordered my men to stop and reorganize for the offensive. Against Hannibal's veterans, we would need to fight even more disciplined. The Carthaginian front was very wide, their African veterans in the center with the citizens and mercenaries on the flanks. I had to extend my front or they could overflow us at the ends. It was all or nothing. I needed all the possible effective ones to fight. It was a risky decision, but I had no alternative. Hannibal had formed a single line. I had to do it, or they would have overwhelmed us. I sent the Trari to fight and kept the Belites in reserve. My Astati were in the center, with my princes and Triari on the flanks. But I didn't order the charge. I let my men rest. I distributed water among my ranks, and after half an hour of rest, almost at noon, I ordered the advance. At that moment, the number of my fallen men was uncertain. Everything, my men's weapons, their clothes, their protections, their banners, the ground, everything was stained red. The ground, which was initially dry and dusty, was now muddy, not from water, but from blood. The battlefield was littered with thousands of corpses. Romans, Gauls, Ligurians, Balearics, Africans, corpses of different cultures and origins were carpeted on the ground on which my men had to continue fighting. And I still had no news of my cavalry. Hannibal had decided to fight defensively with his third line. With 20,000 troops, all veterans and in phalanx formation, that last line was a terrifying sight. In addition, my Astati and princes were exhausted, while those veterans were fresh. My men no longer had projectiles to throw. So tired and sweating profusely, they charged against the tight Carthaginian lines. The sound of the battle was getting louder. Metallic clashes, screams of pain and anguish, laments and prayers all mixed together. It was terrifying. The momentum of my legionnaires came to a sudden halt. The Africans were too strong, too skilled for my Hastati, and they had no trouble starting to advance on them. My flanks of princes and triarii held up against the mercenaries and Carthaginian citizens. From the outside, it would seem that we were repeating the Carthaginian maneuver of Carnus, but nothing could be further from the truth. My Estatus did indeed have a high risk of being defeated and fleeing in disarray. The front line was bending and stretching too much. It could break in the middle, and that would be the end. Fortunately, my princes and triarii advanced, causing Hannibal to fear encirclement and order his phalanx to retreat in formation to reform the front. I ordered the same, and my Hastati, princes and triarii returned to the same height, ready to fight again. After a brief rest and hydration, I ordered another charge. My men, swords drawn, attacked the Carthaginians. My men were fighting for all the defeats that Rome had suffered, for all the friends and comrades who had died at Carthaginian hands. But they were not fools, they also fought for their own survival. If we lost the battle, we would have nowhere to retreat. We would all be killed, each and every one of us, at Punic hands. The conflict between the two powers spanned Hispania, Gaul, Italy, Africa, and many other territories. That day, the war would end one way or another. This time, the Carthaginians were ordered not to advance, simply to keep my men at bay and let us wear ourselves out against their spears. If we couldn't break their flanks, the battle would be lost. Then a scout arrived, and after seeking my reader's permission, approached me and pointed to the horizon. I could see a large cloud of dust. No two, one on each side of the conflict. Gradually, silhouettes took shape. I was unsure if it was my cavalry or the enemies that had won and was returning to battle. Just in case, I asked my men to renew their efforts to break the enemy's flanks and achieve victory. And then I saw it. I saw the banners of my cavalry. Lelio, on the left flank, was returning victorious to the battle. I immediately appreciated the colors of the clothing of Massinius's men on the right flank. By Castor and Pollux, the flanks will be mine. My men kept fighting like lions, no questions asked, following my orders to hell if necessary. The cavalry arrived at the battlefield, and the riders charged against the Carthaginian rear. No more was needed. The Punic army disintegrated. The men turned around and tried to escape from the slaughter, but they didn't know they wouldn't make it. My riders, furious and bloodthirsty, pursued the mercenaries and the citizens who were retreating. Hannibal's veterans held their position, only to see how my princes and triarii surrounded them and charged from all directions. I could see how Hannibal's credit gathered all possible men and fled the area. Rome had won the war. I, Publius Cornelius Scipio, would receive the nickname Africanus for this battle. I had defeated the most fearsome people Rome had faced to date. I had defeated the general who almost brought the Republic to its knees. I had defeated Hannibal Barca. I had saved the Republic. Here ends my story, my history, my journey through this channel. But despite the fact that my stories have ended, there are many heroes and generals you should know. People I see every day in the world of the dead, and when they tell me what they did in life, I only feel admiration. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to stay updated on new content.